So, for all of those media people and others who have said, "Oh, Christians are just trying to inject religion into America as if it's always been there," yeah, well, it has been. Yes, and that's why I left the site at the very top there. See, it says .gov. That means it's a government website. And what does it say here? Religion and the founding of the American Republic. So a little bit about what this says. The exhibition demonstrates that many of the colonies that in 1776 became the United States of America were settled by men and women of deep religious convictions who in the 17th century crossed the Atlantic Ocean to practice their faith freely. That the religious intensity of the original settlers would diminish to some extent over time was perhaps to be expected, but new waves of 18th century immigrants brought their own religious fever across the Atlantic, and the nation's first major religious revival in the middle of the 18th century injected new vigor in the American religion. The result was that a religious people rose in rebellion against Great Britain in 1776, and that most American statesmen, when they began to form new government at the state and national levels, shared the convictions of most of their constituents that religion was, to quote Alexis de Tocqueville's observation, indispensable to the maintenance of Republican institutions. I absolutely agree with that. Faith in God, in the Christian God, and nobody's going to force anybody, but patriotism and that go hand in hand. The efforts of the founders of the American nation to define the role of religious faith in the public life and the degree to which it could be supported. Sorry, I lost my place. By public officials that was not inconsistent with the revolutionary imperatives of the equality and freedom of all citizens is the central question which this exhibit explores. Many of the British North American colonies that eventually formed the United States of America were settled in the 17th century by men and women who, in the face of European persecution, refused to compromise passionately held religious convictions and fled Europe. The New England colonies, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, were conceived and established as plantations of religion. Some settlers who arrived in these areas came for secular motives to catch fish, as one New Englander put it, but the great majority left Europe to worship God in the way they believed to be correct. They enthusiastically supported the efforts of their leaders to create a city on the hill or a holy experiment, whose success would provide that God's plan for his churches could be successfully realized in the American wilderness. Even colonies like Virginia, which were planned as commercial ventures, were led by entrepreneurs who considered themselves militant Protestants and who worked diligently to promote the prosperity of the church. The religious persecution that drove settlers from Europe to the British North American colonies sprang from the conviction held by Protestants and Catholics alike that uniformity of religion must exist in any given society. This conviction rested on the belief that there was one true religion and that it was the duty of the civil authorities to impose it, forcibly if necessary, in the interest of saving the souls of all citizens. Nonconformists could expect no mercy and might be executed as heretics. The dominance of the concept denounced by Roger Williams as enforced uniformity of religion meant majority religious groups who controlled political power punished dissenters in their midst. In some areas, Catholics persecuted Protestants. In others, Protestants persecuted Catholics. And still others, Catholics and Protestants, persecuted wayward co-religionists. Yeah, so see, this is the problem with religion, denominations. Big problem. Yeah, because if you're going to follow the New Testament, Jesus was not about all this denomination. There's a reason Jesus didn't go to the church back in the day. It's the reason if Jesus walked the earth now, he wouldn't go to any of the churches now. He wouldn't. He'd go to the everyday people. That's why I found God broken soul, a broken person all together in a rundown room with tons of coffee running and cigarette smoke. It's called AA. Yeah. Didn't expect it to happen, but it did. And then I've seen it happen to many people throughout my life there, the 30 plus years, okay? Seen it. That's where I've seen the miracles take place. Sort of like Jesus wasn't, it wasn't this hierarchy of priests and pastors, all this stuff, people that went to seminary school. No. So the religious stuff is where it gets totally off track. Anyway, although England renounced religious persecution in 1689, it persisted on the European continent. Religious persecution, as observers in every century have commented, is often bloody. The Continental Confederation Congress, a legislative body that governed the United States from 1774 to 1789, contained an extraordinary number of deeply religious men. The amount of energy that Congress invested in encouraging the practice of religion in the new nation exceeded that expended by any subsequent American national government. Although the Articles of Confederation did not officially authorize Congress to concern itself with religion, the citizenry did not object to such activities. This lack of objection suggests that both the legislators and the public considered it appropriate for the national government to promote a non-denominational, non-polemical Christianity. Congress appointed chaplains for itself, and the armed forces sponsored the publication of a Bible. National days of thanksgiving and of humiliation, fasting, and prayer were proclaimed by Congress at least twice a year throughout the war. Congress was guided by a covenant theology. Lost my place again. A Reformation doctrine especially dear to the New England Puritans, which held that God bound himself in an agreement with a nation and its people. This agreement stipulated that they should be prosperous or afflicted according to their general obedience or disobedience thereto. Wars and revolutions were accordingly considered afflictions and divine punishments for sin, from which a nation could rescue itself by repentance and reformation. The first national government of the United States was convinced that the public prosperity of a society depended on the vitality of its religion. Nothing less than a spirit of universal reformation among all ranks and degrees of our citizens, Congress declared to the American people, would make us holy, that so we may be a happy people. They were the people that found they were so much smarter than we are today. The religion of the new American Republic was evangelicalism, which between 1800 and the Civil War was the grand absorbing theme of the American religious life. During some years in the first half of the 19th century, revivals through which evangelicalism found expression occurred so often that religious publications that specialized in tracking them lost count. In 1827, for example, one journal exalted that revivals, we rejoice to say, are becoming numerous in our country to admit of being generally mentioned in our record. During the years between the inaugurations of Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, historians see evangelicalism emerging as a kind of national church or national religion. The leaders and ordinary members of the evangelical empire of the 19th century were American patriots who subscribed to the views of the founders that religion was a necessary spring for a republican government they believed. And it's true. It is why we have gotten here. It's because I've said before, you cannot live in freedom, but expect to ignore the Creator. And we have had many people along this journey of America's holy experiment that have tried to take the American people off into so many false directions, and they're trying to still do it today. And they should be very obvious. The holy experiment.